I think Trump knows that that's just a game and is not likely to be real.
The Kremlin's announced a 3-day ceasefire between the 8th and 11th of May, with the Ukrainian foreign minister restating Ukraine's offer of an immediate 30-day ceasefire. Let's have a listen to Alexander Mereshko, who's the chair of the Ukrainian Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee.
I'm absolutely certain that history will repeat itself as many, many times before. And there will be no ceasefire. Putin will continue to fight against Ukrainian troops. He will continue to bomb Ukrainian cities. He will continue to kill civilians. I have absolutely no doubt about that.
We've also today had the first official confirmation from North Korea that its military has been involved in operations in Russia's Kursk region. Let's speak first to Sergei Radchenko, professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies and author of To Run the World, the Kremlin's Cold War Bid for Global Power. Sergei, welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to speak to you. Is there any line to be drawn here between the meeting of Presidents Trump and Zelensky in St. Peter's Basilica on Saturday and Vladimir Putin's announcement of a 3-day ceasefire, which does coincide with Russia's Victory Day celebrations?
Well, sure. Putin wants to project an image of the man of peace. He already previously announced a ceasefire for the Easter holidays, and that was actually violated by both sides. But now he does find himself in a situation where Trump is growing increasingly frustrated with him, increasingly anxious. But Putin wants to develop a good relationship with President Trump. He wants for Russian-American relations to normalize. So for him, it is very important to show to Trump that he's still interested in a peace settlement in Ukraine. And look, he is just even making goodwill gestures like ceasefire, but of course he's not willing to accept the unconditional ceasefire that Trump has been calling for.
The point is made in all of these conversations, and it is with merit, Sergei, that should President Putin be authentically a man of peace, he could stop the fighting now. There doesn't need to be build-up of a week.
Oh, absolutely. He could stop the fighting now. The conditions that he put to this is Ukraine basically being cut off from Western support. He says that if he stopped the fighting without any conditions, Ukraine would be able to dig in along the existing lines and rearm and prepare for further confrontation down the line. So he's saying that he wants certain conditions, i.e. the cutoff of Western support. But we have to be to understand what this means for Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine relies on Western support to survive, including military support. So that is clearly not a good starting point for Kyiv.
How does Kyiv sort of portray their willingness, the willingness of Ukraine to progress towards a ceasefire? I say that because there is resistance, of course, to this 3-day suggestion, and the pushback is they should announce an immediate 30-day ceasefire if Russia truly wants peace. But is there an argument to be made that if Ukraine truly wants peace, it should in some ways rush to accept any offer or proposal of a ceasefire?
Well, of course, this is what Putin is trying to show. He's saying, look, we are offering a ceasefire, and Ukraine is the one who is attaching conditions to it. This is all part of the battle for hearts and minds of global public opinion, and perhaps for the heart and mind of one man only, Donald Trump. Ukraine, of course, is not in a good position vis-a-vis that particular proposal from Putin, because Putin is seen here taking the initiative, and Ukraine is in a passive position. If they reject, they'll be accused of being warmongers. If they agree, then this basically means being pulled along by Putin into a position that they don't necessarily want to be in. And of course, we're likely going to see violations, probably by the Russians, also by the Ukrainians, as the last time around.
Sergei, can I also put to you comments on the Ukraine-US minerals deal, which is said to be advancing? A spokesperson for Ukraine's foreign ministry says the deal is still advancing. Ukraine is interested in having this deal. We think the Ukrainian and US teams working on this are making good progress. Everyday work continues. This, of course, President Trump had pushed for a deal to allow the US to share in the profits of Ukraine's critical minerals, something that has been cast by President Trump as repayment for military aid provided by America to Ukraine since the full-scale invasion. What would this unlock at this point? What would the minerals deal do?
Well, nothing much. This mineral deal is not a very good deal for Ukraine. We've seen the proposed terms of this deal, which would have effectively turned Ukraine into semi-colonial appendage of the United States. But it seems that Ukraine has very limited space for maneuver. What the Trump administration is offering is, look, you give us this deal, we'll have people on the ground in Ukraine, we'll have American businesses there, etc., and this will provide you a degree of assurance against further Russian attacks in the future. Whereas, of course, what the Ukrainians really want are viable security guarantees, which would commit the United States and Europeans to providing military support, potentially boots on the ground in case of Russia's further reinvasion after a peace deal is actually reached.
Sergei Radchenko, thank you very much. Thank you for speaking to us.
No problem.
Let's now speak to Kurt Volker, Donald Trump's former special envoy to Ukraine. Kurt, welcome to the programme.
Thanks very much. Great to be with you.
Who has credibility in this situation? Donald Trump doesn't seem to be moving the dial particularly significantly. Ukraine are pushing back against a proposal from Russia, and Vladimir Putin is certainly not a man of peace. Who is credible?
Well, I think you just described what we can count on from all of them. We know that Putin is going to attack Ukraine. We know he's going to be insincere about these ceasefire offers. We know Ukraine is actually quite capable and determined to defend its country, but they will agree to a ceasefire as a way to shift from a military footing to a non-military footing if they have to. And Trump is just trying to go back and forth and see if he can't get something that's going to end the fighting. But with Putin not feeling any pressure, then Putin is not going to do that.
Where can the pressure come from, and does it emanate from a one-on-one, face-to-face meeting between Presidents Trump and Zelensky at St. Peter's Basilica, which seemingly resulted in a slight change of tone, at least, from President Trump on Truth Social, although perhaps a social media post is easier than action?
We have to see if that lasts, because Trump has talked about sanctions on Ukraine before and then never pulled the trigger to actually push to implement them and tighten them and add new ones. We'll see whether he does now. It sounded like he understood that Putin is just stringing him along while ignoring his request for a proper ceasefire. That's why Putin comes up with this gimmick of just 2 days, saying that, okay, we'll do it for 2 days, but then, we want to get more up front before we agree to a ceasefire. I think Trump knows that that's just a game and is not likely to be real. And I think the pressure could come from two things. I think you have to tighten up sanctions implementation, particularly secondary sanctions, as Trump talks about, but he just hasn't done it yet. And second, to assure Ukraine and the world that there is a steady stream, a steady flow of U.S. military equipment and ammunition to Ukraine on a different basis than taxpayer aid. That's not going to happen anymore. But to have it on a paid-for basis, either as loans or purchases from Ukraine. Maybe the Europeans help provide purchases for Ukraine, and the loans could be collateralized by this minerals deal. So it counts not as an appropriation from the U.S. Congress, but a real loan that would be paid back. So there are ways to do that. But if you can assure that there will be military support and that there will be tightening sanctions on Russia, I think those things will be big signals to Putin.
Shall we next consider Crimea, which is so important in the context of a peace deal and indeed into the US efforts to end this war? So this is the part of Ukraine that was illegally annexed by Russia in 2014. And Russia, Putin, wants Ukraine to officially surrender the territory as part of any peace deal. President Zelensky's rejected that on any number of occasions, saying that that is a red line. It goes against Kyiv's constitution. But there is pressure there from Donald Trump, who has reportedly said he thinks that President Zelensky is willing to give up Crimea. That's something we asked Alexander Mereshko about, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, this afternoon.
The truth is that it's absolutely impossible from legal point of view, because we cannot change our constitution, and there are no legal mechanisms in our constitution and our legal system how to cede the territories of Ukraine. It's absolutely out of the question.
But Kurt, this is the issue, isn't it? If it's a red line for both parties, from where does compromise emerge?
I think the compromise is that Russia occupies it, as they have since 2014, and Ukraine does not recognize that occupation. And from 2014 to 2022, there was no war over that. It was disputed by non-military means. I think that's what you get back to. That's something of a compromise. Trump was trying to find a middle ground here, saying, okay, Ukraine doesn't have to recognize Russia's occupation as legal, but the United States will, and that'll be something for Russia. And the more you stare at that proposition, the more silly it looks. Because if Ukraine doesn't recognize its territory as being part of Russia, and most of the rest of the world doesn't do so either, because everyone is sensitive about rewarding seizure of territory, taken by force, and then recognizing that Europe won't do that. If the United States is then doing this by itself, the United States looks kind of silly. So I don't think that proposal is going to stand, that the U.S. would legitimize Russia's occupation either. But you would be ending up in this situation where Ukraine recognizes and the U.S. recognizes that they're simply not going to take the territory back militarily. So you have an illegal occupation that is disputed, just not by military means.
Yeah, it's completely fascinating, Kurt. And then I do wonder, we must ask about the role of Europe in all of this, which has been quite loud about work towards a reassurance force with US backing, and this idea of Starmer and Macron really leading on trying to secure something of peace. Does Europe still have a role?
Yeah, I think that this proposal will go forward. I think that you've got Starmer and Macron taking the lead in putting together what this reassurance force would be. The United States has been quiet about what they are prepared to provide as backup or support, because they don't really want to put that out there and then have that determine what the Europeans do. They really want to have the Europeans take the real lead.
Kurt, always really good to hear from you. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Now, that's Kurt Volker, who was Special Envoy, Donald Trump's indeed, Special Envoy to Ukraine.